They say truck stops are the safest places on the road. Bright lights, other drivers nearby, cameras everywhere. But the drivers in these stories learned the hard way that safety is an illusion. Because sometimes the most terrifying things don't happen on empty highways. They happen where you stop to rest. Hello, little ravens. This video, you're going to hear 3 true truck stop horror stories told by drivers who still carry these memories years later. Stories about strange encounters, silent threats, and moments where they realized something was deeply wrong, even when nothing obvious was happening. They're slow, unsettling experiences that make you question what you saw and what might have been watching you. If you drive at night, or if you've ever pulled into a truck stop after midnight, you might want to think twice before relaxing. Like this video and subscribe on channel. Let's begin with the first story. I've spent more nights in truck stops than I can count. After a while, they all blur together. The hum of diesel engines, the glow of fluorescent lights, the same fast food smells trapped in cold night air. You learn to sleep through noise. You learn to trust routine. That night, routine is what got me into trouble. I pulled into the truck stop a little after 1 a.m., exhausted after a long stretch of night driving. It was one of the larger ones, right off the highway. Plenty of rigs already parked, lights bright enough to make the darkness feel distant. A kind of place where you tell yourself nothing bad can happen. I parked near the middle rows, shut the engine off, and sat there for a moment, letting the cab settle. Metal ticking as it cooled, wind brushing against the trailer. I locked the doors. I always do. I crawled into the sleeper cab, pulled the curtains closed, and lay down. Sleep didn't come right away. My mind felt restless, like it hadn't caught up with my body yet. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the layered sounds of the engines idling, air brakes releasing, the occasional door slam. Then I heard footsteps. At first, I ignored them. People walk between trucks all night. But these were slow, measured. They stopped right beside my driver's door. I waited for the sound of another door opening. Nothing. I waited for the sound of another door opening. Nothing. A knock followed. 3 light taps against the metal, not aggressive. Almost polite. My stomach tightened. No one knocks on a sleeper cab at that hour unless something's wrong. I stayed still, listening. Another knock. Driver? A man's voice said quietly, "You awake?" It sounded normal, calm, almost friendly. That's what made it worse. I didn't answer. After a few seconds, the voice spoke again, closer this time. "I just need a minute of your time." Every instinct told me not to move. I reached forward and locked the doors again, even though I knew they already were. The silence stretched. Finally, footsteps moved away. I lay there, tense, heart pounding, until exhaustion dragged me under. I woke up to my name. Not shouted, whispered, "Hey, wake up." My eyes snapped open. The sleeper was dark, unchanged, curtains still drawn, doors locked. Then it came again, John. No one at that truck stop knew my name. I sat up slowly, pulse racing, and checked my phone. No notifications. No missed calls. The clock read 3:12 a.m. I told myself I'd been dreaming. Stress, lack of sleep. Night driving does strange things to your head. Then I heard breathing. Not outside, inside the cab. It was shallow and uneven, like someone trying not to be heard. I turned toward the sleeper wall, every muscle locked, and listened. The breathing stopped the moment I moved. Silence flooded back in. I swung my legs into the driver's seat, hands shaking as I reached for the keys. Before I could turn them, a knock sounded again. This time, it wasn't on the door. It came from the sleeper wall behind me. 3 taps. I froze, staring at the spot where the sound had come from. The wall didn't move. Nothing pressed against it. It was just there. Then the voice whispered again, low and intimate. You shouldn't ignore people who need help. I slammed the ignition. The engine roared to life, vibration shaking the cab. The sound drowned out everything else. I pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. The lot looked exactly the same as before. Trucks lined up neatly. A few drivers walking toward the building. No one standing near my cab. I told myself I'd imagined it. That the voice, the knocking, all of it was my mind filling in gaps. I shut the engine off. That's when the passenger side curtain started to move. Not fast, slowly, like someone was pulling it aside with 2 fingers. I shouted and lunged forward, slamming the ignition again. The engine roared and the curtain stopped moving. I didn't wait this time. I pulled out of the lot and merged back onto the highway, hands tight on the wheel. I checked my mirrors constantly, expecting headlights to follow me. They didn't. After sunrise, once my nerves settled, I convinced myself it had been exhaustion, a hallucination. I'd heard of drivers experiencing things like that. Later that afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I called the truck stop. I asked the woman on the phone if there'd been any incidents overnight. She hesitated before answering. You're not the first to ask, she said. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I asked. She lowered her voice. About someone knocking on trucks, talking to drivers, saying their names. I asked if anyone had been caught. No, she said. There's never anyone on the cameras. I hung up and sat there for a long time, staring at the road ahead of me. How was that possible? Nobody knew my name. I didn't stop at that place again. Whatever it wasn't human. The feeling is one of powerlessness, hearing your name and a breath inside the cabin. It's impossible to explain rationally. That's my story. I know it's hard to believe, but I know it's true. What makes this story disturbing isn't the knocking. Truck stops are meant to break isolation. They're designed to make drivers feel surrounded, protected, watched. And yet, whatever spoke to him didn't need darkness or distance. It didn't need an empty road. It waited until he felt safe. The most unsettling detail is that the voice didn't demand entry. It didn't threaten. It didn't force itself inside. It knew patience would be enough. And knowing his name changes everything. This suggests intention, familiarity, awareness. Whether it was something supernatural or psychological, it was far too intimate. If this were only exhaustion, the experience would fade with daylight. But it didn't. It followed structure, repetition, escalation. So the question isn't what was knocking. The question is why it chooses truck stops, places full of people, to remind drivers how alone they really are. And if it knows when you're awake, what happens when you finally fall asleep? The night was a heavy, suffocating blanket of black ink and freezing mist. I was hauling a heavy load through the winding backroads of the Appalachians, a route that feels less like a highway and more like a passage into a forgotten world. My hands were stiff against the wheel, and the heater in the cab was fighting a losing battle against the mountain chill. I needed a break, not just for my legs, but from my mind. Driving alone at night is part of the job, but sometimes the isolation starts to play tricks on you. I pulled into a small, flickering truck stop that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s. The neon sign for Eats was buzzing with a sickly yellow hum, casting long, distorted shadows across the cracked pavement. There were only 2 other rigs parked there, both silent and dark. I shut off my engine and sat for a moment, listening to the metal of my truck tick and groan as it settled. It is in these moments of silence that the weight of true trucker horror stories really starts to sink in. I walked into the diner, the bell above the door giving a lonely, rusted chime. The air inside smelled of stale grease and industrial cleaner. Sitting at the far end of the counter was a man I recognized instantly. "Elias?" I said, my voice sounding louder than I intended in the quiet room. He didn't turn right away. He was hunched over a mug of coffee, his old company jacket, the one with the faded patch draped over his thin shoulders. When he finally looked up, I felt a jolt of unease. Elias looked terrible. His skin was the color of damp ash, and his eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark circles that looked like bruises. "Sit down, Marcus," he whispered. His voice was thin, like wind through a cracked window. I sat on the stool next to him, ordering a black coffee from a waitress who seemed to be moving in slow motion. "I haven't seen you since the winter run in Ohio, man. You look like you've been through the ringer." Elias stared into his coffee. "The road takes things from you, Marcus. Things you can't get back. I've been driving these haunted roads for too long. I stopped here to tell you something. Something you need to hear before you head back out into that dark." He leaned in closer. I expected to smell tobacco or diesel, but there was only a faint, cloying scent of wet earth and cold stone. It was an unsettling, psychological horror feeling that made the hair on my arms stand up. "I had a run last week," Elias started, his eyes never leaving mine. "A night road encounter that I can't explain. I was followed at night by something that didn't have headlights. It was just a shape, darker than the trees, pacing me in the lane next to mine. Every time I sped up, it sped up. Every time I slowed down, it was right there, matching my rhythm. I called out on the CB radio, but all I heard was my own voice coming back to me, distorted and crying. I laughed nervously, trying to shake the dread. Probably just shadows and sleep deprivation. "Elias, we've all seen things on the highway after 18 hours behind the wheel." Elias grabbed my wrist. His grip was ice cold. It didn't feel like skin. It felt like frozen leather. "No, Marcus. It wasn't shadows. It knew me. It whispered things about my family. It told me it was tired of waiting. When I finally pulled over at a rest area, I saw it in my mirror. It wasn't behind the truck. It was sitting in my passenger seat." He let go of my wrist and stood up. His movements were stiff, unnatural. "Don't stop at the overlook near the gorge tonight, no matter what you see, no matter who is standing there. Keep the wheels turning, Marcus. Some encounters don't end when the engine stops." He walked out of the diner before I could respond. I watched him through the window as he walked toward a rusted old rig I hadn't noticed before. He climbed in, and the truck pulled out into the mist without turning on its lights. I sat there for an hour, paralyzed by a sense of supernatural highway encounters that I couldn't rationalize. The rest of my drive was a nightmare. Every shadow looked like Elias's truck. Every time I checked my passenger seat, I expected to see a pale face staring back. I eventually made it to the terminal, but the memory of his cold grip haunted my sleep for days. I had terrifying encounters in my dreams, where Elias was calling me from a phone booth made of bone. A week later, I ran into our old dispatcher, Dave, at the main warehouse. "Hey, Dave," I said, trying to sound casual. "You seen Elias lately?" I ran into him at that old stop near the Gap. He looked really sick. Dave stopped writing on his clipboard and looked at me with a confused, heavy expression. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" "Elias. I talked to him for 20 minutes at the diner last Tuesday," I insisted. Dave sighed and leaned against a stack of crates. "Marcus, Elias passed away 2 months ago. Heart attack in the cab. I found him at a rest stop near the gorge. He'd been dead for 3 days before anyone noticed. We had a memorial service and everything. You were out on that West Coast run, so you missed the call." The world felt like it was tilting. "That's impossible, Dave." I touched his arm. He told me a story about being followed. Dave shook his head sadly. "It's been a rough year, Marcus. Maybe you're just overworked. Driving these dark highways alone, it does things to a man's head." I walked back to my truck in a daze. I reached into my jacket pocket to grab my keys and felt a small, hard object. I pulled it out and my heart nearly stopped. It was a brass key tag with the number 42 Elias's old rig number. I remembered him sliding it across the counter during our talk, though I hadn't realized I'd picked it up. It was freezing to the touch. Even in the afternoon sun, it remained ice cold. I looked up at my windshield. There, in the corner of the glass, was a faint, dusty handprint. It wasn't on the outside where the road grime was. It was on the inside. I haven't driven that route since, because now, every time I look at my passenger seat in the dark, I wonder if Elias is still trying to tell me the rest of his story, or if he's just waiting for me to join him on the road that never ends. Rest in peace, my friend. I think we'll meet again someday. What breaks my heart about this story isn't just the ghost, it's the loyalty. Elias died alone in his cab, undiscovered for days, which is the ultimate fear for any driver. Yet even in death, he came back to protect a friend. The physical evidence, like that ice-cold key tag, reminds us that the road is more than just asphalt. It's a place where memories and souls linger. Elias wasn't trying to scare Marcus. He was finishing his last shift, making sure his colleague didn't meet the same dark end. It makes you wonder, next time you see a flickering light or hear a faint voice on the CB, is it just a glitch? Or is it a brother of the road still looking out for you from the shadows? Stay safe out there. You never know who's sharing the cab with you. Rain has a way of turning the world into a blur of neon and gray. But on that Tuesday night, it felt like the sky was trying to wash the road away entirely. I had been behind the wheel for 10 hours, hauling a load of refrigerated goods across the state line. My eyes were burning, that familiar scratchy feeling that tells you your brain is starting to shut down. I knew I couldn't push it any further. Up ahead, a sign for a 24-hour truck stop flickered through the downpour. A small, independent place that looked like a relic of a different era. I pulled in, the tires of my rig splashing through deep puddles that looked like black oil. The lot was nearly empty, which should have been my first warning. Usually, these places are packed with drivers trying to outrun the weather, but tonight, it was just me and an old rusted tanker parked near the back fence. I didn't care. I just wanted a coffee and 10 minutes of sitting on a chair that didn't vibrate. I pulled up to pump 7 to top off the tanks. The fluorescent lights overhead were buzzing with an aggressive, insect-like sound, flickering every few seconds. As I stepped out of the cab, the cold wind hit me, carrying the sharp scent of diesel and something else, something metallic and sour. I jammed the nozzle into the tank and locked it, leaning against the side of the truck to wait. That's when I saw her. She was standing just outside the circle of light from the pump, near the edge of the tall grass that bordered the lot. She looked young, wearing a thin yellow sundress that was completely soaked, clinging to her skin. No jacket, no shoes. Just standing there in a downpour that would have frozen anyone to the bone. "Miss?" I called out, my voice sounding thin against the roar of the rain. "You okay? You need help?" She didn't move. She didn't even blink. Her eyes were fixed on the door of the diner. I stepped toward her, my instincts as a driver kicking in. You don't leave someone stranded in the middle of nowhere. But as I got closer, the air around me seemed to drop 20 degrees. It wasn't just the rain. It was a deep, localized chill that made my breath hitch in my chest. "I just want to go home," she whispered. Her voice didn't sound like it came from her mouth. It sounded like it was vibrating inside my own head, a soft, echoing tone that made my skin crawl. This was the kind of real-night encounter you hear about on the radio, but never think you'll face. "Where's home, honey?" "I can call someone for you," I said, reaching for my phone. She finally turned her head. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes weren't right. They were too wide, reflecting the flickering neon of the open sign in a way that didn't seem human. "The bridge," she said. "He left me at the bridge." Before I could ask who he was, the pump clicked, signaling the tank was full. I looked back at the nozzle for a split second, and when I turned my head again, she was gone. Just gone. There was no way she could have run across that open lot in a second. I stood there, rain soaking through my flannel shirt, feeling a wave of psychological horror wash over me. I wasn't tired anymore. I was terrified. I rushed into the diner, my boots squeaking on the linoleum. The old man behind the counter didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Hey," I panted. "There's a girl out there. Yellow dress. She's in trouble." The old man finally looked up, his eyes weary and unsurprised. He sighed, a long, heavy sound that told me I wasn't the first person to say this. "Pump 7?" he asked. I nodded, gripping the counter. "Yeah, she said something about a bridge." "That's Sarah," the man said, turning back to his paper. "Back in '94, her boyfriend got into an argument with her in his rig. He kicked her out right there by the pump and drove off. Figured she'd walk to the diner. But it was a night just like this blinding rain. She tried to chase after him, slipped, and ended up under the wheels of another truck pulling in. She never made it to the diner." My stomach turned over. "You're joking." "I wish I was, driver. She shows up every time the rain gets heavy like this. She's looking for a ride to the bridge 3 miles up the road." That's where he finally stopped and realized she wasn't in the cab anymore. But she never gets there. She just fades. I didn't finish my coffee. I didn't even wait for my receipt. I ran back to my truck, locked the doors, and hauled out of that lot faster than I ever have in my life. I kept my eyes strictly on the road ahead, refusing to look at the passenger seat. I didn't want to see a yellow dress in my peripheral vision. As I crossed the bridge 3 miles up the road, my CB radio crackled to life. There was no one else on the road, no headlights for miles. But a voice came through the static, a soft, wet, whispering sound. "Thank you for stopping," the voice said. I looked in my rearview mirror. For a heartbeat, just one, I saw a pair of small, muddy handprints appearing on the glass of my rear window, slowly sliding down as if someone were letting go. Driving alone at night is part of the job, but that night, I realized the road carries more than just freight. It carries the people we leave behind. And sometimes, they're still waiting for that ride home. There's something so heartbreaking about Sarah's story. It's not just a ghost tale. It's a tragedy frozen in time. That poor girl is stuck in a loop of rejection, waiting at the very spot where she was abandoned, still trying to catch up to a life that moved on without her 30 years ago. What gets to me is that final whisper on the radio. It wasn't a threat, it was gratitude. Even though she couldn't physically leave that lot, she just wanted to feel seen, to feel like someone cared enough to stop. As drivers, we're always so focused on our destination that we forget the road is a graveyard of unfinished business. Next time you're fueling up at a lonely pump in the rain, take a look around. You might be the only person who can offer a moment of peace to a soul that has been waiting decades for a ride home. Drive safe, little ravens. You never know who's watching the taillights fade. The road has a memory. Every mile of asphalt we cover is built over stories, like these stories of people who checked in at a truck stop, but never truly checked out. For us, these places are just temporary pauses in a long journey, but for some, they have become a permanent home. Whether it's a voice whispering your name in the dark of your cab, a friend returning from the grave to give one last warning, or a girl in a yellow dress forever, waiting for a ride that will never come. These encounters remind us of a chilling truth. We are never as alone as we think we are. As you pull back onto the highway tonight, keep your eyes on the mirrors. And if you see something that shouldn't be there, don't look away. Sometimes, acknowledging them is the only way to make sure they don't follow you home. If these stories made your skin crawl, don't stop here. The night is still young, and the road has many more secrets to reveal. On the final screen, you will see 2 videos that I chose for you to continue on the road of horror. Don't let the engine cool down. See you in the next story, little ravens. Stay safe, stay alert, and keep the doors locked.